for us, like flavor is absolutely paramount. So you're exactly right. We don't want the product to taste super vinegary. And then, you also don't want to cover up the flavor of kombucha with sugar, just from an integrity perspective and then also from a health perspective as well. So we brew everything in-house. We don't use a co-packer. And so all credit goes to Luke Walker, my co-founder, on that front for really just perfecting our house culture. So he inherited the SCOBY that we started the business with from his aunt in Boston, who had been brewing kombucha long before it was cool. And with that, just started to experiment and ended up developing what we think is the best tasting kombucha.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Startup CPG podcast. This is Grace, and today I'm talking with Caroline Howard, one of the co-founders of Walker Brothers. Walker Brothers brews flavorful fermented beverages, offering both non-alcoholic and alcoholic kombucha in a range of unique and delicious flavors. Caroline is one of 3 founders, and the other 2 are, in fact, the Walker Brothers, who first started brewing kombucha as a home project with a SCOBY from their aunt. Since expanding outside of their home project, Walker Brothers Kombucha has made many exciting distribution gains into stores such as Whole Foods, and they're continuing to grow into new stores and new states as we speak. I loved chatting with Caroline, and she has so much wisdom to offer her fellow founders. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, let me know what you think. Hello, everyone. This is Grace, and I'm so excited to be joined by Caroline Howard today, one of 3 co-founders of Walker Brothers. So, Caroline, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and your brand to our listeners.
Of course. So hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Howard. Like Grace mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders at Walker Brothers alongside Sam and Luke Walker. Walker Brothers brews really amazing tasting kombucha. We have both non-alc kombucha and hard kombucha.
Yes, it is so good. And my favorite of the non-alc kombucha is the blueberry jasmine. And when you guys were at Expo West last year, your booth was right next to the Startup CPG booth. And I remember I just kept going up to your booth being like, hey, could I have another? And by the end of the show, I don't know which brother it was, but one of the brothers just gave me a koozie with the kombucha because I had been asking so many times for another kombucha. But it really hydrated me throughout the event, and I'm a huge fan. Yeah, and I also recently got to try the alcoholic version, and I think my favorite is there's like a pineapple one.
Pineapple jalapeno?
Yes,
Or pineapple ginger?
I think it
Either
was
one.
pineapple jalapeno. That was, yeah, so good. That was my favorite alcoholic one. Really, really yummy. But I actually haven't even gotten to try all the flavors yet, so I'm sure there'll be other fun flavors that I will love. So I'm a fan of your kombucha, and I think something I particularly like about it is it toes the line of kombucha that's not too sweet, but not too vinegary, which I think can be very hard to do. Like my first introduction to kombucha was one of the ones that's like so sweet and you're basically just like drinking sugar. But then, you don't want one that's like basically straight vinegar. So I think that you guys do it really successfully, like towing that balance of, both elements. So I'd love to hear a little bit about like what it was like to figure out that balance and why you guys decided to create Walker Brothers.
Absolutely. So I'll start talking about the flavor of the product and then kind of back our way into how the business was founded.
Yeah.
But really for us, like flavor is absolutely paramount. So you're exactly right. We don't want the product to taste super vinegary. And then, you also don't want to cover up the flavor of kombucha with sugar, just from an integrity perspective and then also from a health perspective as well. So we brew everything in-house. We don't use a co-packer. And so all credit goes to Luke Walker, my co-founder, on that front for really just perfecting our house culture. So he inherited the SCOBY that we started the business with from his aunt in Boston, who had been brewing kombucha long before it was cool. And with that, just started to experiment and ended up developing what we think is the best tasting kombucha. And really every single part of our process is geared with that end flavor goal in mind. So we're using extremely high quality inputs. It starts with reishi tea. So if you're in the CPG world, you're probably familiar with reishi, really high quality direct trade teas. Um, so we use a proprietary blend of black, green, and jasmine tea from them. Create a like a sweet tea concentrate, if you will. And then after that, it gets diluted and then inoculated with the SCOBY. So that's the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. We call it our house culture. That fermentation process takes place. And then after it's fermented, then we are flavoring and carbonating. And all of our flavors, again, we really like to limit ourselves to like 1 to 3 flavor additions because we want to complement what's inherent in the tea and in the kind of kombucha flavor itself, not mask it. And like you mentioned, blueberry jasmine is such a lovely example of that, where we're flavoring with a blueberry puree, all organic, and then doing a secondary steep of jasmine tea. So you get these like great floral notes, almost reminiscent of white grape. It just ends up being a really like lovely, drinkable beverage.
Wow, I love it. Yeah, it's so delicious. So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about, I mean, I love that fact that, you know, it's an inherited SCOBY from the aunt because
Yeah,
that's all the better. But what made you guys decide to, yeah, like get into this?
sure thing. So Sam and Luke, really all credit goes to Sam and Luke. That's why their name is on the can. But they were both really into the beverage world. So Sam was working at Littman Brothers, which is a distributor here in Tennessee. And then Luke was working at GT's Kombucha. So, the largest kombucha player in the space. And they were home brewing. And kind of at that same time, they were also very into the craft beer scene and found that as they were getting a little bit older, the craft beer wasn't necessarily settling super well with them. And so they began drinking kombucha as like an antidote to that. And then, Luke was home brewing the kombucha and ended up like kind of experimenting with making a higher alcohol content kombucha because all kombucha has, slight alcohol content in it because it's fermented. Anything fermented is, whether that's kimchi or, what have you. And to get that higher alcohol content, he added an additional pitch of yeast, and that allowed the alcohol content to rise. And so then we had this like hard kombucha, and that's actually what I tried first before I tried the non-alc. And I just thought it tasted so good and was so interesting and complex flavor wise. So yeah, it really was really born out of the product and less so out of kind of like, oh, there's, all these trends in the space. It was more like, this is what we want to drink and it tastes good and other people agree and let's build a business around it. And I think conveniently there were a lot of lots of consumer tailwinds, I think, that have really helped us. Interest in better for you beverage overall, folks wanting functional benefits. And so I think kombucha fits really nicely into that. And it was kind of the OG in the space, but I really think that it's, having a bit of a renaissance these days.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that the hard out or the hard kombucha was the first one you tried. So how did you get involved? Obviously, Sam and Luke are brothers. So, that is easy for them to be involved. But how did you, get involved with this project?
So my husband grew up with Sam and Luke in Boston, and I'm originally from Nashville, and I met Sam when I was in college in Nashville through my husband. So he went to a different school in Nashville. So got to know him a long time ago, and then got to know his brother Luke because his younger brother Luke was best friends with my husband's younger brother Danny. So really like family ties for sure. Got to know them, and then I ended up leaving Nashville. John, my husband, and I did. And we would come back though, because my family lives here, and we would also see Sam and Luke. And we were at their house, and, Luke's like, here, try this. And, tried it, and it tasted so good. And we really liked it. And at that point, they were thinking about building a business around the product because they'd gotten so much positive feedback um, on it from folks that they knew. And they were like, you and John are pretty business savvy. Would you guys be interested in working on this with us? And we said yes. So we wrote the first check into the business. And then I got involved the summer before I started my MBA program, and then stayed involved throughout the MBA. And when that wrapped up, ended up joining them full time. So that's how it began.
I love it. So you're like not a member of the family, but like closely connected, kind of like
Very,
family. Yeah.
very closely connected for
Yeah.
sure. They feel like my brothers at this point.
Yes, totally. Also, I'm sure you guys spend a lot of time talking now that you run a full business together. Um, so once they decided to build this business and you got involved, what were some of the first steps from taking it from like this home brewing situation to, okay, we'll actually have a product sellable beverage?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, obviously the first thing was kind of setting up a larger brewing facility. So we had a couple of iterations as we were getting off the ground. The very first one was actually in Sam's garage. And so that was kind of just for V1, samples to distributors, et cetera. And then during that time, we were looking for a true production space where we could get started. Ended up finding that and built that out. Um, so you have that one side, which is very pure, like we just need a place to make the product. But then, we also needed to figure out kind of what's our route to market. So I think with a lot of consumer goods, direct to consumer seems to make a lot of sense. But for a beverage that needs to be refrigerated and is, heavy, it's not like in a powder. The economics of direct to consumer don't work as well. So we knew that we would be going into retail first. Um, and then we used Sam's distribution connections to get distribution. So because all of Sam's experience had been in that kind of craft beer DSD distribution world, he knew that really well. And we had these two products, one hard, one non-alc. And so it kind of made sense to go that route because they could distribute both products. So that's the route that we followed. We kind of just took the page out of the craft beer playbook and said, okay, we're going to find a great local distributor here in Nashville and kind of build outward from there. And so that's really where we started and yeah, how we spun it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you've been, since that first initial, like, small, maybe, in the, what was it? What did you say? In the garage, and then you got into a proper space. And I've been working with a local distributor, through these connections. How have you continued to expand that distribution? Because obviously, I know you have expanded your distribution. I'm in Philadelphia, and I see Walker Brothers all over the place, which is really fun for me. But how have you guys expanded or continued to expand your distribution?
Yeah, so we kind of think of distribution in two different buckets. So we have our DSDs or our wholesalers. So these are distributors that are more local, traditionally have distributed alcoholic beverages, but also take non-alc into their portfolio now. And they service a lot of independent accounts, as well as on-premise accounts. And for the alcoholic products, they also distribute into grocery. And so we run both our hard and our non-alc lines through that, with the exception of non-alc that's going to chain grocery. The non-alc that's going to chain grocery, as I'm sure a lot of folks listening to this podcast know, runs primarily through, especially in the natural sector, runs through UNFI and KeHE. And so we call that our chain anchored distribution for our non-alc. And and the reason we call it chain anchored is because really securing the chain is what anchors your placement in the distribution. Um, so we have these kind of like two different distribution tracks. And on the chain anchored side, we're obviously kind of going out to retailers, pitching to them, telling them, our awesome velocity stories, all of that good stuff, and then hopefully earning a spot on the shelf. And then that's what anchors the distribution through, a UNFI or a KeHE. And then we want to try to supplement that kind of chain presence out of that DC with smaller independents that also pull from there. So that's kind of how we approach it on the non-alc side. It's all kind of done pretty centralized. We work with a broker, not a lot of boots on the ground there. But on the other side of things, with these DSDs and with our alcoholic products in particular, really regional approach. So started out in Tennessee and then expanded to North Carolina and South Carolina. And so we have 11 states of alcoholic beverage distribution. And most of that is situated in the Southeast with some in the Mid-Atlantic because you've had our product in Pennsylvania. And so with that, that's largely relationship based. And the the distributor actually kind of comes first in that relationship versus the retailer. So we've had, investors make introductions to distributors. We've had distributors be in Nashville and try our product and get in touch about distributing us through their network. So that's really been, I would say, more organic, and yeah, driven more by the distribution itself rather than the kind of stores that you're going into. And then within that, a lot of credit goes to Sam for building out that network of distributors and then also developing those relationships because, he used to be the sales rep. So he knows what, these people who are working as sales reps, what they care about, what really motivates them. And so he goes and does like ride withs and gets people really excited about the brand. And then we are genuinely able to make those distributor salespeople, our salespeople. And when you can do that, it really gives you an unfair advantage because you're not having to have as many boots on the ground. Now, we do have 2 full-time sales reps, one in Tennessee and one in North Carolina, who really drive a lot of value. But in other areas, we're really leaning on our distributors and their sales teams.
We'll be right back.
Hey folks, are you ready to boost your e-commerce sales and profitability? When I ran a brand, the hardest pill to swallow was money wasted on a bad performance marketing strategy. Meet the team from Pennick Digital Marketing. They are strategists, media planners, and SEO experts who can't stand seeing emerging brands struggle with inefficient marketing spend. They create tailored solutions for brands generating over $25,000 in monthly e-commerce revenue to help them achieve profitable growth. But wait, there's more. Pennick is offering qualifying startup CPG brands a special deal. It's either $15,000 free in ad spend or a full quarter of SEO services. To see if you qualify, head over to pennick.co/startupcpg. That's PENNOCK.co/startupcpg.
And now, back to the show.
Yeah, it's interesting because you guys do very much have these kind of 2 pathways because obviously, some places don't sell alcohol, so you're not going to stock the alcoholic version. But you're kind of, and alcohol and non-alc are kind of very different, mostly for like the legalese in, this country, and every state is different and all the above. So it's interesting that you have to kind of juggle that. And I imagine it requires a little bit of like tapping your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time. And how do you kind of manage those 2 channels?
I would say yes, there is quite a lot to manage, especially on the compliance side. And for that, all credit goes to Caitlin. She's our director of operations. She keeps us, up to date on all of our permitting and that stuff. But once you figure that out, I would say the 2 product lines can really reinforce each other. So, for example, in Nashville, we launched with our non-alc kombucha because we were still working on getting all of the relevant permitting and licensures for the hard kombucha. And so we were able to get the non-alc into, amazing coffee shops and salad bars and places that people already had a lot of affinity for and establishments that had a lot of brand equity. And so when a customer would encounter our product there, they were already really predispositioned to like it. And then we were able to get, when we did launch the hard kombucha, it was easier to get chain placement with the hard kombucha at first than it was with the non-alc because the process of selling into a chain for an alcoholic product is a little bit less bureaucratic than it is on the non-alc side, in that a lot of chain stores reserve flex space for local products to accommodate, craft brewers. And so you're able to sell into that flex space in your local region. And so, we were able to get our hard kombucha in Whole Foods pretty shortly after it launched because, we were able to sell into that flex space and, have strong velocities there. And, people who had encountered our non-alc brand and, in a salad shop or something would then be shopping in the beer aisle at Whole Foods and see our product and be like, oh, Walker Brothers, I know that. And be kind of like more predisposed to take it off the shelf. So I do think that the 2 are reinforcing. And then kind of separate or kind of going on with that, When we did approach Whole Foods about our non-alc kombucha, they already had awareness of our brand and our stickiness, especially in Nashville, as a result of our hard kombucha like being in that flex space. So I think it really did help. So yes, they are different and different sales pathways, but they can be reinforcing. And I think you see a lot of brands doing that now. So when we first launched, it was very unusual to be one brand with an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic version of the product. But now that's much more common, right? Like Topo Chico has it, Spindrift has it. Like all of these players have non-alc and hard versions. And I think that really is emblematic of today's consumer. People are more thoughtful about what they're consuming. Sometimes they want alcohol, sometimes they don't, but they want to have a brand that they trust no matter what. And I think Walker Brothers really fits into that nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even anecdotally for myself, I met your brand at Expo West, and then I was at my local Whole Foods and I saw you guys in the alcohol case, and I was like, oh, cool, Walker Brothers. And I was like, I didn't even know they had an alcoholic version. That's fun. So yeah, even anecdotally, I've seen that kind of like reciprocity work out with the alc and non-alc. So obviously you have been expanding in these regions, and I'm curious what other targets you have or any other expansion you're looking towards or that you can speak to.
For sure. So we're super grateful to Whole Foods. So they were the first chain retailer that brought us in. We started with an 18-store mandate in Tennessee and Georgia, and we're able to grow that to 45 stores in the Southeast region. So we're super excited about that. And then Fresh Market was our first national expansion. So we also love the Fresh Market. So I had to give two shout outs to like our OGs. But what I'm really excited about is our non-alcoholic product is launching in Texas in HEB stores. So we won't be in all of them, but we'll be in about 41 HEB stores beginning in December, I think the day after this podcast launches. So if you're listening and you're in Texas, you can go try us at your local HEB.
Amazing. Yes, everybody go try this if you're in Texas at the HEB, and or if you're in somewhere like me in Pennsylvania and you want to get it from Whole Foods, you can go there too. So another thing that I really like about the Walker Brothers product is honestly just the cans themselves and your branding. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you guys developed your branding on the can, and also the decision to do the can versus, a lot of the kombucha comes in those like glass bottles. So a little bit about your decision around how you just package the product.
Sure. So from the get-go, we knew we wanted to be in cans rather than glass. So in Tennessee, which is our home state, curbside recycling for glass does not exist. It's very difficult to recycle glass. It has to be taken to the recycling center. And we're very environmentally conscious as a company and like as a founding team. And so we wanted to make sure that our product was easily recyclable. So we kind of knew we were going with aluminum cans right off the bat. And it's been interesting to see that a lot of other companies have either switched to cans or, things have launched in cans. So aluminum cans have become more popular for kombucha. But yeah, for us, it was like we knew for sure that we were going in aluminum cans. It wasn't much of a decision. We knew that was a priority. And then in terms of the design, Sam and Luke they'd always been really into beverage. And for Sam especially, I think he always had this idea that he might start a beverage brand one day. And I think it was about a year before we got started on Walker Brothers, they had been backpacking in New Zealand. And along the way, they had collected some cans and bottles from, beverages that they had tried while they were there and brought them home kind of like in an inspiration gallery, if you will. And so they had done this, over many years, like not just that New Zealand trip, but, throughout their life. And when we were looking for inspiration for the brand, the ones that the three of us really aligned on and really liked were all from that New Zealand backpacking trip. And I was like, well, let's just look up like what designer did these. And, we looked it up, and sure enough, they were all by the same designer. They were by a designer called Make Bardo, based in New Zealand. And so we reached out to Make Bardo and we were like, hey, we're in the US. And this was before people were doing like a lot of remote work too. So we're like, we're in the US. Like, would you work with us on this? And they said yes. So that's how we picked the designer for the cans. And then the inspiration really came again from Sam. Sam had a bit of a dream whereby the design of our can would have like a bridge on it. Out of this idea that our company was bridging kind of the gap between kombucha culture and beer culture, with beer culture being really focused on community and like community wellness, and then kombucha culture being focused more on like individual health, and kind of figuring out how do we bridge those two gaps and bring like a more collaborative spirit to the kombucha space. And I think that's something that's been a real priority for us. Like we've done a lot of collaboration products. One that I'm like most proud of is our Rishi collaboration. We did a masala chai kombucha. It was a Nexty finalist. So really have loved that. And then we also have one in market now that's a tangerine coffee collaboration with Counterculture. So really just trying to like bring lots of parties in and expand the goodness of kombucha.
Yes, absolutely. That's such a sweet story on so many levels. And the branding does feel both really chic, but also personal and approachable in a way, but like still feels cool to hold and carry. And so that story kind of makes sense in learning more about them and you guys and where that comes from.
Absolutely. And we
Yeah.
wanted something too that felt more approachable as well, because a lot of kombuchas, especially at the time that we had launched, had more of like an apothecary hippie kind of vibe. And, we wanted to have a bit more broader appeal. And I feel like the very kind of clean can design really speaks to that. And then it also speaks to the character of the liquid inside. I like to say that the liquid tastes as clean as the can looks, like just very like crisp and tart, but not vinegary, not too funky. Just really good experience.
We'll be right back. Hola, amigos. About 4 years ago, I got a message from a designer in Colombia who said she'd like to work with Startup CPG to build her reputation in the US. I couldn't believe how affordable her pricing was, and the quality looked top-notch. I started work with them for Startup CPG and then a bunch of my other CPG projects as well. Fast forward to today, they are the most beloved agency in our Startup CPG community. They've got dozens of happy customers like Prickly and so many more. I recommend them to absolutely anybody who will listen, because the combo of top-notch quality and very reasonable pricing is exactly what you want as a startup brand. You can hire them for branding, packaging, your website, or they actually have an awesome startup package that will do all three. If you want to learn more, email them at startupcpg@wagondesignstudio.com or check the show notes. You could also post on our Slack for feedback and just be overwhelmed by how many people want to sing their praises. Gracias, Wagon! And now, back to the show.
Yeah. And also those collaborations are with two like super amazing and cool brands. So that's really exciting. And I've tried the
Above our
Rishi
weight
tea.
a little bit with the collabs.
What'd you say?
I said we're punching above our weight a little bit with the collabs, but we have great partners.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, take the partners you can get. They're great brands, and I'm fans of both of them. So you've been in business for a few years now. I'd love to hear, what's been one of the most challenging moments since founding this kombucha company?
Yeah, so in terms of challenges, I would say for us, one of the most challenging pieces has been building out our own production. So as you can imagine, we now have a 20,000 square foot production space that requires a lot of CapEx to build out. And that was money that we had to raise early on in the business before we had really, proven ourselves as much as we have had today. And so that was definitely challenging, but we knew that we needed to have our own production in order for our reason to exist to really be valid. Because the reason that our product stands out above the rest is because of the way that it tastes, and that brew process can't really be replicated in a co-packing environment. And so we knew that had to be a priority for us in building the brand, and, had to raise a lot of capital early on and use that primarily for production and not for marketing or sales or anything like that. So we've really relied a lot on, organic word of mouth growth, because a lot of our capital has been spent in production. So that was definitely a big challenge for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And fundraising is hard enough even later on in the game. So how did you approach raising that capital? And do you have any advice for other people who might be trying to raise capital?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice is understanding kind of what is on offer to the investor. Like kind of understanding where you're headed with your business and why that would be attractive to a specific type of investor. And then using that to narrow down who you're talking to. So it might be that you're perfectly suited for a CPG VC firm and you're going to grow really quickly and really push down all the doors immediately and that's great. Or it might be that you're taking more of a slow and steady approach and maybe that's better positioned for an angel investor or a family office. That's kind of where we've found our sweet spot in terms of who's interested in our business from an investing perspective. Or it might be that you can bootstrap it, like you have enough capital to get it off the ground and can be profitable early on and continue to invest that into the growth of the business. So I feel like understanding kind of how you intend to grow the business, what's required, and then also like what type of return you think is achievable based on how you're planning to grow, and then use that to narrow down who you're speaking with, because otherwise you can end up talking to a lot of parties that don't really make sense. And then, your time is the most valuable thing as a founder. And so you don't want to be wasting your time in investor conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And have you done any further fundraising since that, initial moment, or have you guys been kind of just like riding that since then?
Yeah, so we've raised a few rounds of capital. So myself and the founders, we kind of kicked things off with an injection of capital. And then we did a small friends and family round in 2021. And then that bigger capital raise, we raised ahead of moving into our brewery. And I think we'll probably raise again to spend finally on, marketing and sales. So that's on the horizon. But yeah, that's been our financing history.
Yeah. Speaking of that marketing and sales, what has been, obviously you've said you've had to kind of rely on word of mouth with marketing and sales, but as you potentially gear up to maybe fundraise to do more marketing, what is your approach and how are you kind of strategizing, potentially increasing your marketing spend?
So yeah, for us, we're just really focused on any initiative that is going to encourage people to try the product, whether it's a temporary price reduction or a demo. We want people to know that kombucha really does taste great. And so any opportunity that we can get that encourages people to try the product, we want to take, and that's where we want to spend that type of money.
Yeah, absolutely. So many exciting things coming down the pipeline for Walker Brothers. And do you have your eyes on any other? I mean, I know you're launching in HEB in Texas, but are there any other states you kind of have your eyes on?
Yeah, so Texas is a big focus for us, like both because of HEB, and then we're also looking at getting alcoholic distribution there as well. So kind of focus on the Lone Star State. Um, and then we recently launched in Colorado, and we think that there's a lot that we can do in that market. So really for us this year, it's about kind of bolstering our presence in states where we already are. And then as opportunities become available to increase that DSD footprint, we'll want to take those. And then on the chain side, we're just really focused on, increasing velocities in the stores that we're in and, kind of using that momentum to get new chain mandates.
Yes, so exciting. So my last question is thinking about, if a founder were to come to you today and being like, Caroline, like I really want to start either a beverage brand or just a brand in the CPG space, what would be your biggest piece of advice to an early stage founder?
Yeah. So when people ask me this, and I swear you guys did not pay me to say this, point them towards Startup CPG. And I found Startup CPG about a year into my Walker Brothers journey. And it was such a huge resource for us because it aligned with when we were beginning to look at chain retail. And I was able to learn so much about just how it all worked and, the various things you need to be aware of and, how to be savvy approaching retailers and, approaching distribution and being really thoughtful about it. And, the webinars are free, and that you guys had partnered with Rodeo CPG to do this thing called Cart Camp that I attended. And I learned so much in Cart Camp. So that's my number one tip, is really just go consume all the content on Startup CPG and then come back and ask me questions. Because I feel like it's such a great crash course, especially for people that might not have had a career in CPG before, or unfamiliar. I just felt like I learned so much, excuse me, from the platform. So that's my number one piece of advice.
Oh, wow. What a lovely way to end our show. A little shout out. But I mean, I would, even if I didn't work for Startup CPG, if I were a founder, I would also use our resources because they're basically all free. So you're just, there's no point in not utilizing them. But I'm so glad it's been useful to you and useful to your team. And as you know, the Startup CPG team is a fan of y'all, and we're very excited to see where Walker Brothers goes next. So speaking of that, where can people learn more about Walker Brothers and see, where they could buy it, or, follow along for when it'll be available in their state?
So I would say social media wise, we're most active on Instagram. We're a team of millennials. So Instagram is our home. So you can learn a lot about us on there and get lots of fun behind the scenes at the brewery. We're a pretty goofy crew. So it's kind of fun from that perspective. There are definitely some kombucha chugs on the Instagram account. Otherwise, you can catch us on our website. So drinkwalkerbrothers.com. We've got a store locator where you can see, where all you can find us. And yeah, we're just excited to be building this business and creating these products, and hopefully, bringing a little bit of joy to people when they crack open the can.
I love it. Well, I'm going to go. I think I have one more Rishi Chai Walker Brothers collaboration in my fridge. So I'm going to go crack one of those open. But it was such a pleasure to chat with you, Caroline, and really excited to see what you guys do next. And thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would help us out so much if you left a 5-star review on ratethispodcast.com/startupcpg. I am Grace Kennedy, the host of the Founder Feature Series, so feel free to add me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on Slack. I'm always on the hunt for new and exciting brands to feature. And if you're a potential sponsor who would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And finally, as a reminder for anyone listening, if you haven't already, we would love for you to join our community on Slack. You can sign up via our website, startupcpg.com.